Welcome to Raul Effect, where we uncover the hidden psychology behind avoidant attachment, emotional connection, and relationships. Today, we're going deeper into the quiet signs that reveal when an avoidant person has truly formed a bond with you. What if the person who seems hardest to reach is actually capable of the deepest attachment once they finally feel safe? Today, we're revealing the subtle behaviors that show an avoidant person is genuinely emotionally connected to you. Stay until the end, because some of these signs are easy to miss. In my work with people who have avoidant attachment patterns, I've noticed that while every person is different, certain emotional patterns appear again and again. Different personalities, different histories, different circumstances, yet many of the same struggles show up when it comes to intimacy and emotional connection. Therapy gives you the opportunity to see beyond the version of someone they show the world. Over time, you begin to understand how their attachment style affects romantic relationships, friendships, family connections, work, and even the way they handle difficult emotions. One pattern I've noticed repeatedly is the connection between avoidance and anger. Not every avoidant person struggles with anger, but some people who have difficulty expressing sadness, fear, disappointment, or hurt eventually release those emotions as irritation or anger instead. They learned somewhere along the way that vulnerability wasn't safe, so anger became easier to access than emotional honesty. This is especially noticeable in some avoidant men, although the pattern can occur in anyone. So today I want to explore a question many people ask. How can you tell when an avoidant person has developed a genuine emotional attachment? More specifically, what kind of person does an avoidant actually become deeply connected to? This matters because avoidant individuals often don't let people into their emotional world quickly. They tend to be selective about trust and cautious about becoming dependent on someone. When they finally form a meaningful bond, it can carry far more emotional weight than people realize. One of the strongest signs is feeling accepted even when differences exist. An avoidant person may feel especially safe with someone who can say, "We don't agree and that's okay," without turning the disagreement into a personal battle. That kind of response tells them they don't have to defend every opinion or change themselves simply to keep the relationship intact. When someone can disagree without creating emotional chaos, the avoidant nervous system often becomes calmer. And once they stop feeling threatened by disagreement, they may actually become more willing to compromise, because compromise no longer feels like surrendering their identity. Another powerful factor is consistency. Avoidant people may become deeply attached to someone who remains steady over time. That doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or accepting unhealthy behavior. Boundaries still matter, but emotional reliability can become incredibly meaningful to someone who is accustomed to protecting their independence. Constant breakups, dramatic reunions, unpredictable affection, and emotional instability can reinforce their instinct to withdraw. A stable person creates the opposite experience. They begin to learn, this person is here. I know what to expect. I can trust this connection. And once an avoidant has genuinely decided that someone belongs in their life, they may hold on to that relationship much more strongly than you would expect. This pattern can appear outside romance too. Many avoidant individuals take significant decisions seriously. They may research, compare, hesitate, and carefully consider their options before committing. But once they've made a decision they believe is right, they often don't feel the need to constantly search for something better. Relationships can work the same way. It may take them a long time to emotionally invest, but once they finally reach that point, the attachment can become surprisingly deep. Another quality that strengthens this bond is self-awareness. An avoidant person may feel safer with someone who can recognize their own behavior without immediately becoming defensive. Imagine you realize that repeatedly messaging them while they're busy has been overwhelming. Instead of blaming them or demanding reassurance, you acknowledge it and adjust. That communicates something powerful. I can look at myself too. Now the relationship feels less like one person trying to fix the other and more like two people taking responsibility for their own side of the connection. Sincere apologies can create the same effect. A genuine apology isn't about keeping score or deciding who should apologize first. It's about recognizing that your actions affected another person and taking responsibility for them. When an avoidant experiences that kind of accountability without criticism or humiliation, their defenses can begin to lower. They may feel safer admitting their own mistakes because vulnerability no longer seems like a threat. And over time, that can create something extremely important: trust. Many avoidant people fear that their needs will be ignored, controlled, or used against them. When someone consistently demonstrates that their feelings matter while still maintaining healthy boundaries, the relationship starts to feel different. It feels safer. And finally, pay attention to how you respond when things don't go exactly the way you want. For example, imagine you feel most secure when you see your partner every couple of days, while they occasionally need more time alone. If you can communicate your needs without turning their need for space into rejection, you create an entirely different emotional environment. You aren't pretending you don't have needs. You're showing them that your needs and their independence can exist at the same time. For an avoidant person, that experience can become one of the strongest foundations for genuine emotional attachment. Meanwhile, an avoidant partner may only have the emotional capacity to meet once a week because of work, responsibilities, or simply needing time alone to recharge. Neither person is automatically wrong. They simply have different needs. So when an avoidant says, "I care about you, but this is honestly what I can offer right now," that may be a genuine limit rather than a rejection. For someone who struggles with closeness, admitting a limitation can already feel vulnerable because they may worry that honesty will disappoint the person they care about. What happens next matters enormously. If their honesty is met with accusations, criticism, or emotional pressure, they may begin learning that vulnerability leads to conflict. Eventually, they become less willing to communicate because opening up feels unsafe. But imagine receiving that same statement with calm understanding. "I was hoping we could spend more time together, so I'm disappointed, but I appreciate you being honest. Let's work with what we have and talk about it again later." That response doesn't mean ignoring your own needs. It simply communicates that their current limitation doesn't automatically threaten the relationship. Instead of feeling trapped, they can breathe. And when an avoidant feels accepted rather than pressured, they may become more willing to give more when they genuinely have the capacity. Another quality that can create deep attachment is emotional peace. Peace doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations or pretending problems don't exist. Healthy relationships still require honesty, boundaries, and accountability. What matters is whether conflict becomes a destructive battle or an opportunity to understand each other. When emotions become overwhelming, sometimes the healthiest choice is to pause and return to the conversation later. Saying, "We've both explained how we feel. We don't have to solve everything tonight. Let's take some time and come back to this when we're calmer," can completely change how an avoidant experiences conflict. They learn that disagreement doesn't automatically mean rejection, abandonment, or endless emotional pressure. And strangely enough, giving them room to process can make them more willing to return to the conversation. They begin to understand that difficult moments don't have to destroy the connection. Another powerful quality is being able to handle everyday mistakes without turning them into disasters. Avoidant individuals can become especially sensitive to the feeling that one mistake might lead to criticism, rejection, or disappointment. When they discover that they can make a small mistake, admit it, correct it, and still remain emotionally safe, their defenses begin to relax. Consider a simple situation. A couple agrees that one partner will spend Saturday evening with friends, but return around 1 a.m. because they have important plans the following morning. Instead, they lose track of time and arrive home at 2 a.m. The next morning, they admit what happened and acknowledge that they broke the agreement. The other partner now has a choice. They can attack, assume the worst, and turn the mistake into a massive emotional confrontation. Or they can address the problem firmly without destroying the person's sense of safety. A healthier response might be, "I appreciate you telling me the truth. I needed you home earlier because we had plans this morning, and now we'll have to adjust our schedule. Next time, I need you to respect the agreement because it mattered for a reason." Notice the difference. The mistake isn't being ignored. The boundary still exists. Accountability is still expected. But the person isn't being humiliated or treated as though one mistake defines their entire character. That distinction can be incredibly important for someone with avoidant tendencies. They begin to learn that making a mistake doesn't automatically cost them the relationship. They can be honest, take responsibility, repair the situation, and continue being connected. Ultimately, avoidant individuals often develop their deepest bonds with people who can remain grounded in who they are, while also offering patience, understanding, consistency, and emotional stability. That doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It doesn't mean accepting repeated broken promises. And it certainly doesn't mean abandoning your own needs just to keep an avoidant comfortable. It means responding proportionately. When acceptance, consistency, self-awareness, sincere apologies, calm communication, emotional stability, and healthy boundaries exist together, trust has room to grow. And trust is rarely created through one dramatic conversation. It's built through hundreds of ordinary moments. Every time you respond with curiosity instead of assumptions, patience instead of criticism, and honesty instead of punishment, you teach the other person what they can expect from you. Avoidant individuals may not always verbalize what they're noticing, but they often pay close attention to these patterns. They're learning whether mistakes will be punished, whether honesty will create conflict, and whether vulnerability will eventually be used against them. When the answer repeatedly becomes, "You can be honest with me and still be safe here," their need to constantly protect themselves can gradually begin to soften. That slow shift in emotional defensiveness is what allows an avoidant person to become more present, more open, and more willing to invest than they once believed possible. Real trust does not come from never making mistakes. It comes from discovering that mistakes can be repaired without putting the entire relationship at risk. Every healthy relationship has misunderstandings, forgotten commitments, bad decisions, and moments when one person disappoints the other. What matters is what happens afterward. When accountability is combined with compassion, both people can address problems without feeling controlled or attacked. For someone with avoidant patterns, that experience can be completely different from what they may have learned earlier in life. Instead of expecting criticism, rejection, or emotional pressure whenever something goes wrong, they begin to understand that difficult moments can actually lead to greater understanding. That realization makes vulnerability feel less threatening and emotional closeness easier to maintain. Another important piece is giving an avoidant person enough time to process what they feel. Some people understand their emotions by talking immediately, while avoidant individuals may need to think privately before they can even identify what is happening inside them. They might need time to figure out whether they are hurt, overwhelmed, disappointed, frustrated, or simply exhausted. Giving them that room without becoming emotionally distant yourself can be incredibly powerful. When they discover that you can give them time without withdrawing your care, the relationship starts feeling less like pressure and more like safety. They learn that intimacy does not require them to explain every emotion instantly or surrender control over their own emotional process. And this is why consistency often matters more than intensity. Huge romantic gestures may create excitement, but reliability creates trust. A person who keeps their word, communicates honestly, respects boundaries, and responds in a steady way can become far more meaningful to an avoidant than someone who is incredibly affectionate one day and emotionally unpredictable the next. Predictability gives their nervous system fewer reasons to stay guarded. Over time, they begin to expect that disagreements do not automatically become disasters, and that vulnerability will not later be used against them. That quiet stability can eventually make them more comfortable showing affection, contributing more, and imagining a future with someone they genuinely trust. Something else begins to change once that security becomes established. At first, an avoidant person's energy may be focused heavily on protecting their independence and creating enough distance to feel comfortable. But when they repeatedly experience acceptance, fairness, and emotional steadiness, that instinct can gradually shift. Instead of asking, "How do I protect myself from this relationship?" they may begin asking, "How can I contribute to it?" You may notice this through small changes rather than dramatic declarations. They might communicate more consistently, remember something important to you, offer support without being asked, compromise more easily, or make greater effort to stay connected. These small behaviors can reveal growing emotional investment, because the relationship no longer feels like something they have to defend themselves against. But emotional bonding is not about becoming perfect for each other. A healthy relationship is two imperfect people learning how to understand one another more effectively. An avoidant person does not need a partner who never gets upset, never has needs, or never asks for anything. What matters is being with someone who can communicate those needs honestly without turning every need into pressure, blame, or emotional punishment. At the same time, the avoidant partner has responsibilities too. They need to communicate more clearly, take responsibility for their behavior, and continue developing healthier ways of relating. A relationship cannot become secure if only one person is doing the work. The strongest connections develop when both people are willing to grow. One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidant individuals is that they simply do not feel deeply. Many actually experience powerful emotions, but have learned to keep those emotions private. Instead of immediately expressing what they feel, they may observe, reflect, and process internally before deciding whether it is safe to reveal anything. Because of that, their attachment may not always look obvious from the outside. They may show love through dependability, quiet support, remembering small details, helping with responsibilities, respecting your boundaries, or consistently making space for you in their everyday life. These actions can seem subtle, but for some avoidant individuals, they may carry more meaning than dramatic declarations of affection. Understanding these quieter forms of connection can prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. Eventually, a secure relationship can teach an avoidant person something extremely important. Independence and intimacy do not have to compete. They do not have to choose between having their own life and being deeply connected to someone. They can spend time alone without threatening the relationship. They can maintain their identity while becoming emotionally closer. They can have boundaries without creating emotional distance. That realization challenges one of the deepest fears behind avoidant attachment. When someone experiences a relationship where independence is respected and emotional connection remains strong, commitment can begin to feel much less threatening. Instead of viewing intimacy as something that takes freedom away, they can begin seeing it as something that adds to their life without changing who they are. Another major shift happens when they realize they do not have to be emotionally perfect to remain accepted. Many avoidant people carry an expectation that showing too much emotion, admitting a mistake, or needing support will eventually make someone reject them. Because of this, even small disagreements can sometimes feel bigger than they actually are. But repeated experiences of patience, respect, and calm communication can slowly challenge that expectation. They begin learning that they can say, "I was wrong." They can admit they are confused. They can talk about uncomfortable emotions. They can reveal something vulnerable without automatically losing the relationship. That creates an entirely different emotional blueprint. Vulnerability begins to become connected with safety instead of danger. And that is why genuine change usually happens gradually. It rarely comes because someone pressures an avoidant to open up or repeatedly tells them they need to communicate better. Real change develops through repeated experiences that prove their old fears are no longer accurate. A calm conversation after conflict, a boundary that is respected, an apology that is sincere, a difficult feeling that can be discussed without punishment, a disagreement that does not end with abandonment. Each of these moments quietly teaches the same lesson. Closeness does not have to mean losing yourself. Eventually, they may stop expecting conflict to automatically lead to distance. They begin believing that problems can be worked through together. And when that belief becomes strong enough, they participate more fully in the relationship, not because they are being forced to, but because they genuinely want to. That is where emotional bonding becomes deeper. Not through pressure, not through perfection, but through repeated experiences of honesty, mutual respect, emotional safety, and the freedom to grow together without either person having to disappear in the process. If an avoidant person truly feels safe with you, their connection may not always be loud or obvious, but it can become deeply meaningful over time. Real attachment grows through consistency, patience, honesty, and mutual respect. If you recognize these signs, remember that healthy love should never require you to lose yourself to keep someone close.